Hi, everyone. John Michael Coppola here, and welcome to the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast, where we chat with the actors, directors, choreographers, designers, producers, music directors, lyricists, playwrights, and all the artists who make the Chicago area theaters come alive. We're so excited to have you here with us today. But before we get started, we just want to remind you to please like, subscribe to, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues who you think would appreciate the conversations we're having. We'd be so grateful for your support in this way so we can continue to bring these stories for years to come. Thanks again for being here, and now, curtain up on today's episode. Today's guest has lived and worked in Chicago as an award-winning playwright, composer, and lyricist for 45 years, whose works have also been produced worldwide. In summer of 2025, Dramatic Publishing Company released his stage adaptation of Aldous Huxley's classic novel, Brave New World, which is his 13th script in print. He has received the L. Arnold Weissberger Playwriting Award, the Midwestern Playwrights Festival Award, the Cunningham Commission Award, the Blue Ink Playwriting Award, 3 Playwriting Fellowship Awards from the Illinois Arts Council, and has been nominated for 3 Joseph Jefferson Awards, a Suzi Award, and an Emmy Award. Finally, in December of 2025, he received the Innovation in Teaching Award from the University of Chicago Graham School, where he teaches playwriting and theater appreciation. We chat about all of this and much, much more in my conversation with Douglas Post. Now let's go to the top of the show. Hi, Doug. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining me here on the podcast. I greatly appreciate it.
Excellent autumnal day.
It is, isn't it? It's been getting, some nice days, some cold days, but that's to be expected here in Chicago. The leaves are changing. We actually just got rid of a big tree in our yard earlier this week that would drop all sorts of dastardly leaves everywhere, and not a leaf in sight. It's beautiful. Beautiful thing. So listen, every time we have someone on the podcast, we like to ask them the same question at the very start. And that is to please tell our listeners a little bit about where you grew up, a little bit about your training, and then finish up with your first theater experience. So I hand it over to you.
Yeah. I will. Very briefly, I feel that I must mention my background, my family, because my mom was 12th generation Pennsylvania Dutch, which makes me number 13. And my dad was second generation Polish American, born and raised in Chicago. So I'm number 3 with me, third generation Polish American. But his dad, my grandfather, Joseph Swapkowski, first generation, was a rather prominent architect in this town.
Okay.
And if you're familiar with the name Gene Gang, the Gang Studio on Division Street.
Oh, sure.
They are housed in what was once the Polish National Alliance building, which my grandpa designed.
Okay.
So we have our roots here. And I think, Joe today, Joseph Swapkowski, would be thrilled that he has living, breathing architects moving through that structure. So my dad met my mom in Pennsylvania when he was stationed there during the war, courted her, married her, brought her to Chicago, which she didn't care for. So as soon as they could, they moved to the suburbs, which is where my brothers were born.
Okay.
And my dad was employed by the Shell Oil Company, and he was a company man all his life, which meant we moved around a great deal.
Okay.
So he was transferred. The family went with him, of course, to Portland, Oregon, which is where I was born, then across the country to Westport, Connecticut, then back to Seattle, Washington. Now we're living in a place called Mercer Island. Then Deerfield, Illinois, on the North Shore, yes.
Okay.
Was there with the family for a year before he was again transferred, this time to England.
Wow.
So from 66 to 69, we lived in a little town called Woking, which is about 30 miles southwest of London. And at that time, it was cheaper for my mom and dad to take me to the theater than it was to hire a babysitter.
Fantastic.
It was fantastic. And I got to see everything. I mean, I saw pantomimes and mysteries and political dramas and Shakespeare and sex comedies. I got to see the original production of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Tom Stoppard.
And you were how old during this time?
So I was 8 when we went over and 11 when we came back.
Wow.
And I will mention that my dad got to see Laurence Olivier at the Old Vic, same theater, in Othello, the legendary production of Othello with Maggie Smith.
My God.
And he said it was the best thing he ever saw. And next to it, he cannot name number 2.
Wow.
So we then came back to the States, but not before stopping off in New York, which we had done going over to because we took a boat both ways. I got to see Broadway musicals in 66, then in 69. And we are now back in Deerfield for 4 years. And after I finish up at junior high school, I am attending Deerfield High School. And until this moment, I thought I was going to be a visual artist, maybe following in my granddad's footsteps, maybe an architect, maybe some kind of illustrator. I am asked by a good friend to audition for a student variety show. It was called Stunts. It was all student acting, student directors, writing, design, etc. And so I say, sure, and I have a sketch in mind. So we audition with our 2 sketches, which are rejected. But the director of the show, I'm a lowly freshman, and he's a senior. He comes and finds me in homeroom and he says, I've written a sketch for Stunts. I would like you to be in it. And I would also like you to be in a big production number we're going to do. Are you interested? And I said, sure, this sounds like fun. And I had nothing else to do with my free time. So that experience was immeasurably enjoyable and life-changing. And out of it, I met a lot of kids who were already involved in drama clubs. So I went to see what they were doing and I liked it and I became a part of that. There was again, an older girl, I think she was a junior, who invited me to audition for the Angelettes and Kingsmen, which was the youth choir at the First Presbyterian Church of Deerfield. Because the previous spring break, they had done a touring production of Jesus Christ Superstar.
Okay.
And they're now remounting it. And so I auditioned and I was an apostle. And that was an amazing experience too. So suddenly in the course of my 2 years at Deerfield, I'm acting in plays, I'm in musicals, I'm heavily involved in drama club, doing scenes and cuttings. I'm involved in forensics. And it all kind of came together for me, John, my sophomore year, because between freshman and sophomore year, we had done that previous year, spring break, we had taken the songs from Godspell on tour. And so now I thought, well, I know something about Superstar and Godspell. I think I'll try my hand at this rock opera thing. So I wrote my own libretto based on the Gospels. And I showed it to a friend of mine who was in charge of the youth group at our church, who, without my knowing it, gave it to our choir director.
Oh boy.
Who called me up and said, did you write this? And I said, yes, I did. And he said, well, I think we should do it. And I have 2 other guys in mind to compose the music, because I was not at that moment a composer. And I said, great. And I would like to direct. So I didn't know it, but at that moment I was negotiating my first contract.
Now,
and he said yes.
So you weren't a composer. So how did you write the? Did you write the music by singing in like a recorder, like
I didn't write any music. It was only the lyrics.
Oh, it was only the lyrics. Okay,
it was
gotcha.
A completely sung through work. So
gotcha.
All I did was the libretto with no thought that this is ever going to see the light of day. But it was a challenge to myself to see if I could do it.
Yeah.
And so yes, he said yes, and to the idea of me directing. And life would never be that easy again. But we did it. We took it on tour through Pennsylvania. And after 2 years at Deerfield, the family was once again transferred to, this time, Houston, Texas. So I finished up high school down there, again, heavily involved in their performing arts program.
Yeah.
And by the time I finished high school, I realized I had been in 9 schools in 12 years.
Wow.
So I ended up attending college at Trinity University in San Antonio. And I was a drama major, and I double majored in English And I was composing by this point, so I started taking music theory classes to learn how to create a piano vocal score. And I studied art history and religion and astronomy, psychology. So I ended up with a pretty good liberal arts education. This is 1979, and I had made up my mind as soon as I could to move to Chicago.
Moved back to Chicago because you attended
Back
school
to,
up there. Wow. Okay.
right, yeah.
Did you know anybody here still?
I knew exactly two people.
Okay.
And what had happened was while I was in high school in Deerfield, uh, my older brother was attending Loyola University and was roommates with Bill Norris, William J. Norris, who was then a part of the Organic Theater Company,
Okay.
what I call Stuart Gordon's band of merry pranksters. And my brother took me to see Bill in Warp, the world's first science fiction epic adventure in serial form, which was 3 plays that they did in rep.
Okay.
And it was so much fun. I mean, it was basically a spoof on Marvel Comics,
Okay.
but it was theirs. It was entirely a script that Stuart Gordon and Lenny Kleinfeld wrote, and Bill was in the show acting and also composing and playing music. And it was life-changing because, you know, I had seen all this great theater in New York and in London, and they were housed in what is now the Greenhouse Theater Center, what was at the time the Body Politic Theater. And their work was funny and rude and deeply moving and energetic and fully alive. And the whole thing looked like it cost about $200. And I thought, I want to be a part of this. Whatever this is, I want to be a part of this thing where it doesn't look like you need a small army to put up a play.
Yeah.
So I knew Bill, and whenever I could, I would come into town and see shows at the Organic Theater Company. And I knew John Ostrander, too, who was affiliated with them. He and Bill co-wrote a play called Bloody Bess, which was a pirate show. John was also an actor. Bill was also a playwright and a director and a composer. And at that point, I thought, I want to move to Chicago and I want to be a jack of all trades. I thought I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to be a director. I'm going to be a designer. I want to be a playwright and a composer. And bit by bit, I let all those things go that I thought I was less good at. And I stayed with the writing and I stayed with the composition. And Bill and John, I will tell you, were wonderful friends and mentors to me. I remember meeting them for breakfast within a month of coming to the city. And they said, well, the first thing is we need to find you a place to live and we need to find you a job. And they did that. They took care of that for me.
Well, great friends.
Great friends.
Now, of course, speaking of friends, we had James Sherman on our podcast very early on. He was one of our first guests. I know you two had lunch very recently because he told me you had, or maybe it was breakfast. But he mentioned his time at the Victory Gardens Playwrights Ensemble, of which you were also a part. So tell us a little bit about your time there.
Yeah, you know, it's fascinating because I think Jim and I may have different recollections of how the Playwrights Ensemble came together. And I think Dennis Acek probably has a third recollection. You know, so this is my take on what happened, which was fascinating. I had 2 plays produced at Victory Gardens, and I had a third one coming up. And Jim had numerous productions there, and we were friends. And I think we became aware that Dennis had been talking about VG as a playwrights theater. Because he was at I think it was at a board meeting, and he was trying to differentiate. People said, you know, what separates this theater from every other theater in Chicago? And he tells the story that he identified Steppenwolf as an actor's theater, which it mostly was at that time, and Goodman as a director's theater, which again, it mostly was then. And he said, I guess we're a writer's theater. He was thinking on his feet. He will tell you, I think. I don't want to misquote him, but now you're getting my recollection of what Dennis recollects.
Fair enough.
And in the programs at Victory Gardens at that time, there was a list of playwrights in residence. So Jim and I got together, and Jim was a playwright in residence. I was not, but I had a play coming up. And we noticed that some of the people who were listed as playwrights in residence were not being produced anymore. Mm. So we asked for a meeting with Dennis and then managing director John Walker, who was filling in for Marcy McVeigh while she was on maternity leave, I think, and raising their son. And we basically asked, what does it mean to be a playwright in residence at Victory Gardens, and who's in and who's out? And he took all of this very well. And he said, well, let me think on this and I'll get back to you. And he called me up. And I distinctly remember him saying, okay, there's going to be 12 of you, and you can call yourselves whatever you want.
Okay.
So we started meeting regularly because most of us were in the Chicago area at that time. We decided to call ourselves an ensemble, even though actually we were more of a collective, but ensemble was the sexy term at the time.
Yes.
Right. And our what we really wanted to do was we wanted to try to help raise the visibility of Victory Gardens on a local and on a national level, any way we could. Mm-hmm. And some of the things we incited were, I think, well received by the administration, maybe some less so. But on the day when, this was now 4 years later, because the ensemble was formed in 96. So the year 2000, we discover we are the recipients of the Tony Award for Outstanding Regional Theater.
Yes.
And Jim either called me up or sent me a fax. I think we were dealing with faxes at that moment. And it just said, mission accomplished. Congratulations, partner.
What a great way to culminate the aspirations you guys actually had, was to bring it to that national attention. And it doesn't get much better than that, I can't imagine. Let me ask you a question about your inspiration for your writing. Are there any experiences that you've had in your life that have been most significant in creating your identity as a writer?
I think a lot of it goes back to, I don't want to harken back too far, but I think those 2 years at Deerfield High School were pivotal. Because I thought I was going to be a visual artist, and suddenly everything I thought I knew about the arts got changed into the performing arts. Okay. And I don't know that I was an introvert, but I certainly became more extroverted working in the theater. I found a community to work with, and I just loved putting pen to paper. And I mentioned the rock opera, which I somehow got produced through the church. But I also, by the time I had graduated from high school, I got 2 more musicals produced. Now I was composing music at this moment, banging it out on the piano, and mostly having to teach by ear because I did not yet know how to notate my stuff. And then in college, I got 2 more one-act musicals produced and a 10-minute play. And shortly after graduation, 2 more shows. We staged one above a bar and another at a community center, a rock and roll version of The Tempest. And the other was a sci-fi play. So by the time I had come to Chicago, I had already had 8 shows produced. Mm-hmm. I remember a very good friend of mine. I don't know that this completely answers your question.
That's okay.
But I had a good pal in college who approached me at one point, and he said, I think at some point your work might actually be good. And I thought, well, wait a minute. I thought it was already good. I thought I was creating greatness.
You thought wrong, apparently.
I thought wrong. And I'm glad I had, I think I was taken aback. And then I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, because you're not afraid to be bad.
Oh.
And that's very meaningful. It's Samuel Beckett, fail, fail again, fail better.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize while I was doing it how badly I was failing and flailing. But you have to get through all that because that's the only thing that's going to lead you to mediocrity, and then maybe something good, and then you can aspire to greatness.
Now, not that I'm labeling your early rock opera as mediocre or anything less, but are there any early recordings of it that you've listened to that you were like, yeah, that was bad? Or that you were pleasantly surprised by?
No. I do know, like when I think back to that, I remember an early lyric. The best lyric in the show probably was the scribes and Pharisees singing a song to our teenage Jesus. And the lyric was, wooden king provoking revolutions on the beach. When you sing, we're listening to slip-ups in your speech.
Ooh.
And if you take that apart, the lyric is actually terrible, because wooden king provoking, well, you're already rhyming king with king. Revolutions on the beach. Please point me to all the beaches near Jerusalem, right? And when you sing, we're listening to slip-ups in your speech. You can't do it. You can't sing and be making a speech. And that was the best lyric in the show.
I don't mean to laugh, but you make very good points. At least it's on your own work. Oh, that is quite funny. Any other gems from that show that you can recall that were, I don't want to say that you're proud of, because clearly you're not very proud of that.
And I'm proud that I had the chutzpah to write it.
Sure.
And that it got done.
At 16?
I was 15 years old when it was produced. And remember, John, I was directing it too.
Right. And it toured for 2 years through Pennsylvania.
No, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Okay. 1 week.
1 week.
It was over spring break. I think we went through 6 or 7 churches.
How did it get to Pennsylvania? And was that by your doing or your teacher's doing?
No, I had nothing to do with that. It was the church and the choir.
Church.
Yeah, putting together, contacting other churches and saying, hey, we would like to tour with this show. Do you want us to come perform? And then presumably you would have housing for us.
Yeah.
Then we're only going to be with you for 24 hours. So how much trouble can we make?
Right.
We will then move on to another church.
And how large of a cast was it?
It was huge. I mean, it was probably 40 or 50 of us.
Oh my God. I'm thinking 20 people.
No, it was full out.
Was it a full orchestra? Was it just a piano?
I think there were 7 or 8 pieces in the orchestra.
Amazing.
And our choir master played bass. He played upright bass.
And he orchestrated it?
Yeah. Well, there was a separate guy. I'm not sure how the orchestrations came together.
Okay.
But the 2 guys who did the music were brilliant. I will tell you this, I do remember. The music was much better than the libretto.
Okay.
I have no qualms about saying that.
Okay. Now, I also wanted to chat about your teaching, because you are also a teacher, teaching playwriting and theater appreciation. So what are some of the lessons you try to impart your playwriting students?
So I currently teach at the University of Chicago Graham School. Mm-hmm. And I get to teach theater appreciation and playwriting. Mm-hmm. But I've also taught at a number of other places around town, Northwestern, DePaul, right. Chicago Dramatists, the Newberry Library, Victory Gardens. I used to teach there too. I talk to my people about this idea that there are no rules for writing for the theater, but there are tools. And I'm going to try to give you a few.
Please.
For your toolbox. And we talk about character, we talk about plot, structure, theme or idea, which are really 2 separate things. We talk about language. The first language of the theater was poetry. So not that you should write poems, but your language can be heightened, perhaps. Yeah. And then we talk about text and subtext. But the main thing, John, that I try to emphasize is, what do your people want or need or must have? How badly do they want it? What happens if they get it? What happens if they don't get it? Mm. And I tell this anecdote that I heard from Marcia Norman, who's incredibly smart lady, used to teach at Juilliard. And she said, you can create a woman who has to find Beethoven's Lost Symphony. And I may not care about Beethoven and I may not care for classical music,
Mhm.
but if I believe that woman will move heaven and earth to get what she wants, I'll follow her anywhere.
I've heard of the same type of rules applying to acting. You need to know where you're coming from, what your goal is, how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
So I never was aware that it sort of aligned with the same principles of writing. It makes perfect sense, but having not taken playwriting, I was never aware that those two things were were very similar.
Well, I think a lot of this comes from the fact that I was a student of acting for 10 years. And so I got to be in a lot of plays
Yeah.
and I got to learn those plays from the inside out. And so my writing, I come at it not from a literary background, but from a theatrical background.
Uh,
And I also believe that, I know our friend Jim says the primary purpose of the playwright is to create work for actors. And I think he's not entirely wrong. I know that what I try to tell my people is you want great actors to be in your plays.
mhm.
So you have to write great parts for them. You have to give them really interesting things to do and wonderful things to say as well.
Thank you for that. We actors appreciate that very much.
We try, otherwise you're not going to be in our plays, are you?
I wouldn't say that, but they're certainly more enjoyable to be in, for sure. Now, speaking of the Graham School, you recently learned that you're this year's recipient of the 2025 Innovation in Teaching Award there. So, first of all, congratulations. And what was your reaction when you learned about that honor?
Well, it was very, very meaningful, and it was emotional because it's the single best teaching gig I've ever had.
Hmm.
I don't know how much you know about the Graham School, but it's continuing education. It is non-accredited. When the University of Chicago was first formed, it was important to the founders to have a school that was devoted to the community,
Okay.
so that people who were not trying to get a bachelor's or a master's or a doctorate had some place to go and could be, if they wanted to, lifelong learners.
Okay.
So everything happens, for me anyway, in the room, although I do give my people homework, which then they have to bring in. If it's theater appreciation, you've got to read the plays.
Mhm.
If it's a playwriting class, please bring something to the table
Okay.
that you're working on. If it's intro to playwriting, which is what I'm teaching now, there's weekly assignments. Um, and I've been there 4 or 5 years, and what's really cool is that what I've noticed is there's some cross fertilization. So people who are studying playwriting may want to take a break from that, and then they will take some theater appreciation courses to study other playwrights. And likewise, some of my theater appreciation students become Thespis curious and decide that they might want to try to write a play. And I get a lot of repeat customers. I've got a guy who just announced in a class I'm teaching now, this is my 12th class with Doug. And I said, you ought to get a punch card.
Take 10, get one free.
Exactly right.
Oh, I love that idea. With a kid in college, I think that's something that I might bring up to his school just to say, my good friend and the winner of the Graham School Innovative Teacher of the Year Award just made this recommendation. I think you should bring it to your board of directors.
Yeah, and along with that award, I will say it's a mixed blessing because word has gotten out and a few of my students have now found out. So I'll give out an assignment and they'll say, "Oh, Doug, how innovative." You know? So you got to be careful. But yes, I think the award itself is going to be presented. I know this actually. I'm not being coy. It's at the holiday gathering, which is in December, and so I will say a few words. But it's a wonderful place. I mean, the staff is great, the students are great, and honestly, John, I feel so lucky because I get to write what I want to write. I get to read what I want to read. I get to teach what I want to teach.
Hmm.
And so outside of that and good health and the love of my family, I can't really ask for anything else.
Well, congratulations once again on that. I'm really excited for you. Uh,
Thank you very
Now,
much.
your plays have been produced all over the world, and I'm curious if you had the opportunity to see them in other countries, and if you have, how they played in those countries. And now, James, when I asked a similar question of him, he said, well, he knew where all the laughs were in the case of the comedy, so even if he didn't speak the language, he knew the punchline was coming. So I'm curious what your experience was if you've had that opportunity.
I have, and this is, I must tell you, this is a byproduct of being a playwright that I did not see coming. But I've been lucky enough to travel to Canada, England, Germany, Austria, and to be embedded, as I say, with a theater company while they're working on my script is to experience that culture not as a tourist, but again as someone who is inside for a
Mm.
brief period of time. Probably the most memorable experience is the month I got to spend in Russia in 1995. For 3 summers, I was invited to be a part of the O'Neill National Playwrights Conference,
Okay.
88, 89, and 94. And the conference, I don't know how much you know about it, but it's
Not at all.
situated in Waterford, Connecticut. And it's called the O'Neill, the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center, because it's right next door to the Monte Cristo cottage where O'Neill lived and grew up. And that's the setting for Long Day's Journey into Night and the setting for Ah Wilderness. And so, although there's nothing definitive that proves that O'Neill spent time on this particular estate, it's it's beautiful, it's bucolic, it's right on the water. So we have to imagine maybe some of his boyhood was where the O'Neill Theater Center is today, which is it's very rural and it's very, very not New York. So I was there 88, 89, 94. And there was this thing called the Shelikova Playwrights Conference over in Russia, which was patterned after the O'Neill and happened on the estate of the Russian playwright Ostrovsky.
Oh, wow.
So every summer, at least then, I know this is not happening now, one of the Russian plays would come over to the O'Neill with the Russian playwright and the Russian director and would be performed by American actors in English. And every summer, the reverse would happen. One of the plays at the O'Neill would be selected to travel to Shelikova with the playwright and the director and would be performed in Russian by Russian actors.
Wow.
So from the summer of 94, Lloyd Richards called me in the spring, so it's now 95, to say, I am suggesting that your play and you, Drowning Sorrows was the name of the play, go over to Russia for a month and receive a workshop production as they do at the O'Neill, script in hand, minimal production values. So my wife and I got to go over for a month, and we spent the first week in Moscow as guests of the state, and the final week in St. Petersburg, likewise as guests. But in between, there were 2 weeks at Shelikova, and it's very spare, and you're basically in cabins that are dormitories, and there's one central building. There's no theaters per se. You have to go out and find a space where your play is going to be done. And there were 5 plays going up. So on the first day of rehearsal for Drowning Sorrows, I realized that they had translated the wrong draft of the play. We're 20 minutes into the reading, and kind of what Jim was saying, I could just feel rhythmically something is wrong. And we stop and we look at it, and sure enough, they had done something they were not supposed to do. The Russians had left the O'Neill with one of my scripts in hand, which they were only supposed to read it and then, talk amongst themselves. But that was the 3rd draft. I had done 2 more drafts since then.
Oh my God.
And my translator, who was a perfectly lovely Russian woman and fluent in English, felt that the trouble was with me, because if I'd only written 1 draft, we would not be in this predicament.
Oh, okay.
So she and I, when we were not in rehearsal, translated, retranslated the entire script. And we're out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's one manual typewriter and 2 sheets of carbon paper. So we get it done, and everything translates except for the title. And I said, well, Drowning Sorrows. And she said, no, it just doesn't work for us. And I said, well, you are sad and you drink. And why am I having to explain this to the Russians? I mean, you folks have a pint of vodka for breakfast. What? And finally, what was explained to me is that in Russia, sadness comes, it stays with you as long as it wants, and then it goes away on its own accord. There's nothing you can do to alleviate it.
Wow.
Yeah, and I said, well, in the States, you know, we go to a psychotherapist, we take pills, work out at the gym.
Yeah. Or drink.
Or drink.
Yeah.
Yeah. If nothing else works.
That's the title. Yeah.
Right. Hunt's the title. So no, you know, and what we finally ended up with was the new title was When the Sorrows Go Away.
Okay.
Right. But I thought, what an incredible find for me to have experienced that. And it tells me so much about the Russian people. I could not have found it in a book. And the Russians, by the way, are absolutely beautiful people.
Yeah. So,
but knowing them and knowing their culture, I thought, you know, they may not be wrong. And I understand why this is as it is. And I was so grateful to have had that firsthand experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I just want to, once again, thank you for joining me here on the podcast. I had the best time chatting with you. I hope to have you on again soon. We can wax poetic about a lot more topics about your career. But please let our listeners know where they can find more about you online. And if they want to come take classes with you at the Graham School, that'd be helpful as well.
You know, you can find me at my website, which is douglaspost.net.
Okay.
I have 13 scripts in print. So if you go to Dramatic Publishing or Dramatist Play Service or Theatrical Rights Worldwide or Broadway Play Publishing, my work is there. And then I also have a record label. So my label is Long River Records. And my albums, there's 5 of them, 3 original cast recordings, 1 of demos, 1 of instrumental tracks. If you want a physical CD, you can purchase that from Amazon. And then any place where digital music can be procured, my music is also there.
Wonderful. Well, Doug, thank you again for joining me here. I hope it's not long before we get to see each other again, either in person or over Zoom. Once again, we could have some more conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me on, John.
You bet. Thanks for joining us at the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The Chicago Theater Makers Podcast is a production of Spirit Art LLC, and our podcast theme music is by Paul Langford. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please drop us a note at our website, ChiTheaterMakersPodcast.com. That's ChiTheater, makers with an S, podcast.com. We hope you enjoyed spending time with us as much as we enjoyed spending it with you, and we'll see you on the board soon.